Hello everyone, it's been a while on the channel and welcome back. I'm in the person of Barbary Daniel Mensor. Some call me Danzzy. And then today we are here to talk about version control, specifically Git. But before we know what Git is, let's have a general idea about what version control is. And so we are going to find out what version control is and why do we use it. Before we now check how to set up Git and then how to use it as well. We'll also go through some frequently asked questions about version control. So what is version control? Version control is a system that is being used by programmers to keep track of changes that are being made to their code, right? So let's say for instance a programmer is working on a project. Maybe for instance he is building a website that involves HTML, CSS and JavaScript. Now he has designed everything, he has developed everything, the site is working all right. What he can do is to allow Git or allow a version control to keep track of the changes that were made from the time he started a project up to the time that he stopped, right? So that whenever he begins to make new changes, if in case he runs into a problem, it will be easier for him to go back in time to find out what changes he made that is causing the problem to the site. So that's basically what version control is all about. Okay, so now how does version control work? Version control is just like it uses a database to store the changes that are being made. So that's what happens. It uses the database to be able to keep track of the changes that you are making on your code. And whenever you need it, you just need to type some lines of code, right? To be able to go back to find the changes that you made. That's how version control works. Now we have some examples of version control. We don't only have Git, we also have Subversion, which some people call SVN. We also have one called Mercurial, right? So these are some of the examples of version control. And as I said previously, we'll be hammering more on what Git is, right? Now with version control, there are some terms that we need to know before we can start typing codes, right? So for instance, whenever we start or whenever we give version control the access to be able to keep track of our changes, right? A copy of your original code is being saved, and that's what we call the master branch, or that's what we call master, right? And whenever we need to make changes, what we can do is to make a copy of that original version, and then we take it out, we take it aside, make our changes there, test them to see if they are feasible, test them to see if it will not break the project down. And once we are done, we put it back into the original code, right? And so the process where we make copies of our original code so that we can make changes, it's known as branching. And so you'll hear this term a lot when you begin to use version control. You have branches being created just like the way a tree has branches, right? So whenever we need to make changes, we can decide to create a branch where we make the changes, test them out. When they are feasible, we put them back into the original code. And that's where the term merging comes into play. So we have git branching, we also have git merging, right? And now with version control, it's not just that you can use it for only you yourself, right? When people are working collaboratively on a project, they can also decide to use the original piece or the original code to create their own branches, right? Where they do the changes, and when they are all done and sure what is happening, they merge them together. So that's one advantage about Git, right? It gives you the chance for different people to work on a code and then later on bring them together. So we have branching and merging, as I said. And then we also need to know what a working directory is, what a staging area is, what a local repository is, and what a remote repository is. Now, the working directory is where you are working right now, right? So let's say, for instance, you open your ID, maybe Visual Code, or maybe Atom or Sublime Text, whatever you are using. So let's say we open Visual Studio Code and we are making changes. We are writing lines of code into our project, right? That's the working directory. Now we also have the staging area. The staging area, it's like a place where you can keep your code, right? Once you have written new lines of code into your project, you can place um those changes at the staging area, right? And when you are now sure that you really want to save those changes, you take them into the local repository. So the staging area is like a place where you keep changes until you are sure you want to save them, right? And so to move from the working directory into the staging area, there we need to write a line of code called the git add, right? And once we are in the staging area and we are sure that we want to save those changes, we need to take it into the local repository. Some call it the local repo. And to be able to do that, we have a line of code that we call the git commit, right? Now with the git commit, it's just trying to attach a note to the changes that you made, right? So for instance, let's say I'm still working on my web development. I just built the navbar, right? So I can put a note, I can attach a note to those changes saying that worked on my navbar. That's what a git commit does, right? And so once you commit, it goes into your local repo. Now the local repository is just trying to say that the changes are saved on your computer. It's saved locally on your computer. Now remote repository comes here when you are dealing with online services, when you want to save your changes onto the cloud, right? And I'm sure you might have heard of GitHub. That's an example of a remote repository, right? Where you can save your changes. It's no longer on your PC, but it's now saved on the cloud, or it's now saved on your GitHub. And that can be done with Git push. Now, how do you set up Git, right? So Git is just like any normal application that we have on the PC. So we need to download it and then install it, right? So I open my web browser and then I search for download Git. So we pick the first link that is here, and then we are given the chance as to whether we want to install it on Mac OS, Windows, or Linux. So you choose depending on the system you are using. We are using Windows here, so I can just decide to click here, download for Windows, and then I select my type of system. I'm using 64-bit, so we just select the 64-bit, and then the process starts. So that's how it's downloaded, as simple as that. But because I already have the app downloaded, I don't need to go through that process. So I'll pause it, and then once you are done with the download, you come back and let's continue. So this is the app here. All we need to do is to open it, and then we click on next, right? And then next. Then here we need to determine the ID we'll be using for the git, right? And in my case, it's Visual Studio Code, so you need to select it depending on what you use. And then we click on next. Then we leave most of these options here, we need to leave them just as default. All right, and once we are done, the installation should begin. We are finally done with the installation of the app, and in the next video we'll find out how to use Git using one of the projects that I ever worked on some time ago. So make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss out on it when the video comes out. Drop your likes, drop your comments, and then make sure you share as well. See you in that video.